What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends walks onto a talk show stage and refuses to play by the rules? In just 36 seconds, a single comment would turn a routine interview into the most explosive moment in daytime television history. Harrison Ford sat down on The View expecting a conversation about his latest project. What he got instead was a confrontation that would leave the studio audience gasping and the panel in complete disarray. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a full-scale collision between old-school Hollywood integrity and modern talk show entitlement. The morning started like any other episode. The audience filed in, cameras were positioned, and Harrison Ford made his entrance to thunderous applause. He smiled, waved to the crowd, and took his seat among the hosts. Whoopi Goldberg sat at the center, flanked by Joy Behar, Sarah Haynes, Sunny Hostin, and Ana Navarro. The energy seemed normal at first, friendly, even. Whoopi opened with what appeared to be a standard welcome. "Harrison Ford, everybody. Thanks for being here. We're so excited to talk about your new film." Harrison nodded politely. "Happy to be here." But then, Whoopi leaned forward with a look that suggested she had other plans for this interview. "Before we get into the movie, I want to ask you about something. You've been in this industry for decades. You've made a fortune, multiple fortunes, actually. So I'm curious. What do you say to people who think celebrities like you are out of touch with regular Americans?" The question hung in the air. It wasn't about his film. It wasn't about his craft. It was a loaded political grenade disguised as small talk. Harrison's expression shifted slightly. He could sense where this was heading. "Well, I don't think making movies means you're out of touch," Harrison replied carefully. "I've worked with people from all walks of life. Crews, stunt teams, writers. It takes hundreds of prospects. People to make a film." Whoopi wasn't satisfied. "But you fly private jets, right? You have multiple homes. Meanwhile, people are struggling to pay rent. Don't you think there's a disconnect there?" Joy Behar jumped in, sensing an opportunity. "Yeah, and didn't you once say something about climate change while literally flying your own plane?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "I've been an environmental advocate for 30 years. I've put my money where my mouth is. I've donated millions to conservation efforts. I actually do the work." Whoopi cut him off. "But you still fly private. That's the point. You tell everyone else to sacrifice while you live in luxury." The audience started murmuring. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the fun celebrity interview they'd expected. This was becoming an interrogation. Harrison took a breath. "I came here to talk about a film that hundreds of people worked incredibly hard on. If you want to have a political debate, that's fine, but maybe let's acknowledge what we're actually doing here." Sarah Haynes, trying to lighten the mood, interjected. "Harrison, let's talk about the movie. What was it like working with?" But Whoopi spoke right over her. "No, I think this is important. People need to hear this. You're in a position of privilege, and you use that platform to lecture people. I think that's worth discussing." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Lecture people? I've spent my entire life working. I started as a carpenter. I built my career from nothing, and I've used whatever platform I have to try to protect the planet for future generations. If that bothers you, I'm not sure what to tell you." Sunny Hostin leaned in. "I think what Whoopi is trying to say is that there's a perception problem. When wealthy celebrities talk about sacrifice, it rings hollow to people who are actually sacrificing. Then maybe you should have those people on your show instead of inviting me here under false sinus." "Pretenses?" Harrison shot back. His voice was calm, but the edge was unmistakable. Whoopi's face hardened. "False pretenses? We invited you to have a conversation. A real conversation, not just a puff piece where we throw softballs and you promote your movie. A real conversation involves respect," Harrison said. "It involves actually listening. This feels more like an ambush." Ana Navarro raised her hand as if to moderate. "Okay, everyone, let's take a breath here." But Whoopi wasn't done. "You know what? I've been doing this for years. I've interviewed thousands of people, and I'm tired of celebrities coming on here expecting us to kiss their feet. You're not special, Harrison. You're an actor. You pretend for a living." The studio went silent. Even the camera operator seemed to freeze. That line had crossed a boundary, and everyone knew it. Harrison stared at Whoopi for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady but cold. "You're right. I do pretend for a living. I pretend to be heroes, adventurers, leaders, characters that inspire people, characters that mean something. But I don't have to pretend to be respectful. I don't have to pretend to have integrity. That's real." Whoopi scoffed. Oh, please, don't act like you're better than everyone else. I'm not acting like anything, Harrison replied. I walked in here in good faith. I thought we'd have a conversation about storytelling, about cinema, about the craft. Instead, you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to tear me down for reasons I don't even understand. And honestly, I don't need to sit here and take it. Joy Behar tried to jump back in. Harrison, come on, we're just asking questions. This is what we do. No, Harrison said firmly. Asking questions is fine. What you're doing is something else. You're trying to create a moment. You're trying to bait me into saying something you can turn into a headline. And I'm not interested in playing that game. Whoopi leaned back in her road, chair, arms crossed. So, what are you going to do? Walk off? Run away because someone challenged you? Harrison stood up. The audience gasped. He looked directly at Whoopi. I'm not running from anything. I'm choosing not to participate in whatever this is. There's a difference. Sarah Haynes looked panicked. Harrison, please. Let's just reset. We can talk about the movie. But Harrison was already removing his microphone. I appreciate that, Sarah. I really do. But this isn't about the movie anymore. This stopped being about the movie the second I sat down. Whoopi's voice rose. You can't just leave. We're in the middle of a show. Harrison turned to face her fully. Watch me. The tension was suffocating. Sunny Hostin tried one more time. Harrison, we value your perspective. Let's find a way to continue this conversation constructively. Harrison shook his head. I've been constructive. I've been patient. I've tried to engage honestly. But when you start with the assumption that I'm the problem, there's nowhere productive to go. You've already made up your mind about who I am. Whoopi stood up now too, her voice sharp. You know what your problem is? You can't handle being questioned. You're so used to everyone treating you like royalty that the minute someone pushes back, you fall apart. Harrison let out a short, bitter laugh. Fall apart? I've been in this industry for over 50 years. I've faced critics, studio executives, and journalists far tougher than this. The difference is they had something to say. They asked real questions. They weren't trying to score points for their audience. Don't you dare condescend to me, Whoopi snapped. I've earned my place here. I'm sure you have, Harrison said. But earning your place doesn't give you the right to disrespect your guests. Anna Navarro stood up, trying to physically position herself between them. Okay, this is getting out of hand. Can we all just take a moment? But the moment was already gone. Harrison looked at the audience, many of whom were watching with wide eyes and open mouths. I apologize to all of you, he said. You came here expecting something different. So did I. Whoopi wasn't backing down. Don't apologize to them. They can see exactly what's happening here. You're throwing a tantrum because you didn't get the interview you wanted. Harrison's voice dropped lower, more controlled. If that's what you need to believe, fine. But everyone in this room knows what actually happened here. You invited me on your show, not to have a conversation, but to prove a point, to grandstand. And when I didn't give you what you wanted, you got nasty. Joy Behar tried to interject again. Harrison, that's not fair. Whoopi was just what? Harrison interrupted. Just doing her job? Her job is to make guests feel attacked? To insult what they do for a living? The producers were clearly scrambling behind the scenes. Cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of the meltdown. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't planned. This was real conflict playing out in real time. Whoopi pointed a finger at Harrison. You want to talk about insults? You walked in here with an attitude from the start. You've been condescending since you sat down. That's absolutely not true, Harrison said, his voice rising for the first time. I answered every question. I engaged with every topic you brought up. But when you started attacking my character, attacking what I believe in, I pushed back. And apparently, that's not allowed here. Sarah Haynes was nearly in tears. Please, can we just stop? This doesn't have to be like this. Harrison looked at her with something close to sympathy. You're right. It doesn't have to be like this. Which is exactly why I'm leaving. Whoopi threw her hands up. Fine, leave. Go back to your mansion and your private jet. We don't need you here. That was the final straw. Harrison stopped in his tracks and turned around slowly. You know what's interesting, Whoopi? You spent all this time trying to paint me as out of touch, as privileged, as disconnected from real people. But the only person who's been acting entitled this entire time is you. You think because you have this platform, you can say whatever you want without consequences. You think you can treat people however you want because you're the host. That's not integrity. That's not journalism. That's just being a bully. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Bully. He'd said it. The audience was completely silent now. Even Whoopi seemed momentarily speechless. Sunny Hostin recovered first. Harrison, that's a very serious accusation. It's not an accusation, Harrison replied. It's an observation. And I think everyone here knows I'm right. Whoopi found her voice again. Get out! Seriously, get out of here! I was already leaving, Harrison said. You just couldn't help yourself. You had to have the last word. You had to quote. Make sure everyone knew you were in control. Joy Behar stood up. Okay, this is crazy. Harrison, just go. Whoopi, sit down. We need to get to commercial. But neither of them moved. Harrison and Whoopi were locked in a stare-down that felt like it could last forever. The audience didn't know where to look. Some people were recording on their phones despite the rules against it. This was history happening. Ana Navarro finally managed to speak with authority. We're going to take a break. Everyone we're taking a break. Harrison broke the stare first. He looked around at the panel one more time. I hope the rest of your show goes better than this. I genuinely do, but I won't be part of it. He walked toward the exit. Whoopi called after him. You're making a huge mistake. Harrison stopped but didn't turn around. The only mistake I made was thinking this would be different, that you'd be different. And then he was gone. He walked off the stage, through the backstage area, and out of the building. The audience sat in stunned silence. The panel looked at each other, unsure of what to say or do. Whoopi sat back down heavily, her face flushed. Sarah Haynes was the first to speak. I don't know what just happened. I do, Whoopi said, her voice tight. Harrison Ford just showed everyone who he really is. But Joy Behar shook her head. Whoopi, I love you, but that got out of hand. We pushed too hard. We didn't push anything, Whoopi insisted. We asked legitimate questions, and he couldn't handle it. Sunny Hostin looked uncomfortable. I think we need to be honest about what happened here. That got personal, on both sides. Ana Navarro nodded. We're supposed to be professionals. That wasn't professional. The audience was still silent, still processing. Some people looked angry. Others looked confused. A few looked satisfied, like they'd gotten more than they paid for. Whoopi addressed the camera directly. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, well, we'll figure it out. The show cut to commercial, but the damage was done. In the span of less than 15 minutes, a routine celebrity interview had exploded into a full-scale confrontation. Harrison Ford, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, had walked off The View after refusing to be lectured and insulted. Backstage, producers were having frantic conversations. Legal teams were being called. Publicists on both sides were already crafting statements. But none of that mattered in the moment. What mattered was what had just happened on live television. Harrison Ford had drawn a line. He'd stood up for himself in the face of what he perceived as unfair treatment. He'd refused to be bullied, refused to play along with an interview that had turned hostile, and he'd walked away with his dignity intact. The panel, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces. They'd pushed a guest too far, and he'd called them out for it. Whoopi had tried to control the narrative, to make Harrison look like the bad guy, but it hadn't worked. The audience had seen everything, they'd heard everything, and they would make up their own minds about what had really happened. As the commercial break continued, Sarah Haynes leaned over to Whoopi. What are we going to do for the rest of the show? Whoopi didn't answer right away. She was still processing, still trying to figure out how things had spiraled so quickly. Finally, she said, we move on. We do what we always do. We keep going. But Joy Behar wasn't convinced. People are going to be talking about this for weeks, maybe months. We need to address it properly. What do you want me to say? Whoopi asked. That I was wrong? I wasn't wrong. He came in here with an attitude, and when we didn't kiss his feet, he threw a fit. Sunny Hostin sighed. That's not what happened, Whoopi, and you know it. The tension among the panel was almost as thick as it had been with Harrison. They were supposed to be a team, but now they were fracturing too. Everyone had their own version of events, their own interpretation of who was right and who was wrong. Ana Navarro tried to be the voice of reason. Look, we all saw what happened. We were all part of it. Maybe instead of trying to spin this, we should just be honest. Things got heated. Words were said. Harrison left. That's the truth. Whoopi crossed her arms. I'm always honest. That's my job. Your job is also to make guests feel welcome, Sarah said quietly, and I don't think Harrison felt welcome from the start. The commercial break was almost over. The stage manager was counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They were back on air. Whoopi took a deep breath and faced the camera. Well, as you all just saw, Harrison Ford has left the building. Things got a little tense. We asked some tough questions, and he decided he didn't want to continue the conversation. Joy Behar added, "It's unfortunate. We were looking forward to hearing about his new movie." But the audience wasn't buying it. There were murmurs, whispers. Some people were shaking their heads. They'd seen what happened. They knew it was more than just tough questions. Sunny Hostin decided to be more direct. "I think we need to acknowledge that the conversation became confrontational. It wasn't just about the questions. It was about how we engaged with our guest." Whoopi shot her a look, but Sunny continued. "We're supposed to create an environment where people feel they can speak freely, and I'm not sure we did that today." Ana Navarro nodded. "I agree. We can disagree with our guests. We can challenge them, but respect has to be part of the equation." Whoopi was clearly unhappy with this turn. "I respect everyone who comes on this show, but I also don't pull punches. People know what they're getting when they come here." "Maybe that's the problem," Sarah said softly. The words hung there. The panel was essentially admitting, on live television, that something had gone wrong, that their approach had backfired, that they'd lost control of the interview and, ultimately, lost their guest. The rest of the show limped along. They tried to move on to other topics, other segments, but the energy was gone. The audience was distracted. The hosts were distracted. Everyone was still thinking about Harrison Ford walking off that stage. In the final minutes of the show, Whoopi addressed the situation one more time. "Look, not every interview goes the way you plan. Sometimes there are disagreements. Sometimes people don't see eye to eye. That's life. That's television. We'll move forward, and I'm sure Harrison will too." But her words felt hollow. The truth was, this wasn't just another disagreement. This was a moment that revealed something deeper. It revealed the tension between hosts who see their role as challengers and guests who expect basic courtesy. It revealed the fine line between tough questions and personal attacks. It revealed what happens when egos clash and neither side is willing to back down. As the credits rolled, the panel sat in their chairs, the weight of what had happened settling over them. They'd started the day expecting a routine interview with a Hollywood legend. They'd ended it with one of the most controversial moments in the show's history. Harrison Ford, meanwhile, was already miles away. He'd gotten in his car and left without speaking to anyone. He didn't need to explain himself. His actions had spoken loudly enough. He'd walked into that studio as a guest and been treated like an opponent. And he'd made the choice that felt right to him in that moment. He'd walked away. The fallout would continue for days, weeks, maybe longer. But in that moment, as Harrison drove away from the studio, he felt something close to relief. He'd stood his ground. He'd refused to be disrespected. He'd shown that even in the face of hostility, you can maintain your dignity by simply choosing not to participate. Back at the View, the hosts gathered their things. Some of them looked shaken, others looked defiant, but all of them knew that something significant had happened. They'd crossed a line with a guest who refused to be crossed, and the whole world had watched it happen. The cameras were off now. The audience had filed out. The studio was quiet except for the crew breaking down equipment. Whoopi sat in her chair for a moment longer, staring at the empty seat where Harrison had been sitting just an hour before. Joy came up beside her. "You okay?" Whoopi nodded slowly. "I'm fine. He's the one who walked out." "Yeah," Joy said, "but maybe we should think about why he walked out." Whoopi didn't respond. She gathered her notes and headed backstage. The day was over, but the conversation was far from finished. Social media was already exploding. Clips of the confrontation were being shared thousands of times per minute. People were taking sides, debating who was right, analyzing every word and gesture. But through it all, one thing was clear. Harrison Ford had come to The View expecting a conversation. What he got was a confrontation. And when faced with a choice between sitting there and taking it or standing up and leaving, he chose his self-respect. He chose his dignity. He chose to walk away rather than be part of something that felt wrong. And in doing so, he created a moment that would be remembered as one of the most dramatic exits in talk show history. Not because of what he said, but because of what he wouldn't tolerate. Because sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is knowing when to leave.